Well, I think Maori research, and if you can go broader than that, Indigenous research, will become a model for good community research. It's moving in that direction already. And I think increasingly research will be less and less focused on a kind of an abstract academic point and more focused on a real need. If it's effective because it is able to identify the real point. But translational research has not always been the aim, particularly when researching Maori communities. And one of the reasons that a number of Maori communities kind of lost faith in research is that they were the victims of the research rather than the beneficiaries of the research, because the research simply spelled out a problem and made the community own the problem, which actually didn't help the problem. But translational research is essentially aimed at helping the community identify the concerns they have and then getting in line some data and some tools that will help change the problem. There's two parts to research, or three parts. One is to shape up the methodology you're going to use. That's an important part. The next bit is to do the research. And the third bit is to then look at the research and apply it to real life situations. And that's the notion of translational research. And that's what community research in particular has in mind, that the end point is not just presenting the findings of the research, but embodying that in a course of action that will lead to change. And for Maori communities there are very specific values and very specific nuances of expression and very specific concerns that other communities may not have. A researcher that can't identify with the group they're researching with is going to have trouble. But essentially it's a joint exercise. You've got a team, and the team includes a researcher with the skills. The other part of the team includes the community that have voiced the concern and are looking for some change in their community. They're a team. And if the team can't work together, or if one part of the team doesn't understand the other part or misinterprets the whole objective, there's a problem. So you, in research of the type that you're looking at for Waiparota, you need to have researchers who understand the community, who are respected by the community, and who are able to interpret their findings in language that is understood by communities. If the researcher is so taken by the community's plight and identifies totally with the community and adopts the same attitude that has created the problem, the research is going to be biased and will actually be, it'll finish up being a kind of a statement rather than evidence-based research. The reverse problem is the researcher is so detached from the real world or the real community and is guided only by a theoretical construct of what should happen and ignores the evidence which is coming directly from the community. That's an equal problem. So for researchers, there's a skill involved to be able to tune in and be part of the community team, but at the same time to be not overwhelmed by it and to be distant enough to be a little bit objective about the study that's underway. If you want it recognised as a legitimate research outcome, you need to get that published in a journal, which is a reputable journal. If the purpose of the research is to change policy, it needs to be shaped in terms that can be understood by government. If the research is for community action, then it needs to be shaped in language that's going to help communities take ownership of the findings and put them into action. So I think there may be several reports that might come out of one research project. It depends on who the audience is. And very often the funders have their view on what constitutes good research. Being able to make a case to the funders based on the notion of community research is going to be really important. I must say that the funders in New Zealand are moving towards that, adding it to, they're not saying it's the only way to do research, but they're recognising that community-based research is important and that ought to be funded. Oh, well, Whānau Ora wouldn't exist if it hadn't been for community voices and the voices of communities. And so the research associated with Whānau Ora was built almost entirely around the consistent messages from people in the community about what should change. And I think the key to it was the consistency. It wasn't like people at Wellington were saying something and people in Christchurch were saying something else. There was a consistent message. And the skill of the research was to be able to unpack the consistency and see that as a thread for change. But we also felt that we don't really know for sure that that is the only or the best approach. And so we've got to be conscious of what are the outcomes that the program achieves to justify it. And if the outcomes aren't good, then you'd want to change direction. So to get the outcomes, we really have to have good research, evidence-based research, and the evidence has got to align with what the people want. But without that evidence, we can't actually say that Whānau Ora is working or not working or how it needs to change. So research, measuring the outcomes, is a critical part of Whānau Ora.